Caden Richards is a college-going teenager who has it all. He is good-looking, is the star of the college football team, and has the hottest girlfriend around. However, he holds a dark secret which no one knows of. Caden is actually a werewolf, meaning that he can supernaturally morph into a giant wolf on a full moon night. In the opening scene, Caden and his team are seen dismantling their opponents in a football match. Because of his super athletic abilities, he is easily getting the points for his team. Unfortunately, this angers the opposite captain, so he launches an attack on Caden and breaks his nose. Enraged, our werewolf protagonist retaliates and beats the guy to a pulp, shocking everyone around. The following night, Caden takes his girlfriend to a secluded spot and starts making out with her in the car. Coincidentally, it is a full moon night, and when the cloud clears, Caden starts turning into a ferocious werewolf. As expected, this terrifies the girl, and she runs away from there in an instant. Caden's problems continue to pile up as the next morning, when he wakes up in his room, he finds that he has massacred both his parents. Caden is completely taken aback by the sight, but before he can even process the incident, his girlfriend arrives outside with the cops. This act of betrayal infuriates Caden, so he once again turns into a werewolf. But instead of attacking his girlfriend, he uses his superhuman abilities to escape the place without being detected. Unfortunately, he is labeled a murderer all over the news and the entire country begins looking for him. After evading cops the whole day, Caden reaches another city at night, where he sees two bikers trying to assault a girl. He politely orders them to stop, but when they don't listen, he turns into his other form and finishes them off brutally. This obviously scares the girl, so she runs away from there. Caden also realizes the damage that he has caused, prompting him to steal a bike and escape. Some hours later, he arrives at a bar and starts drinking to drown his sorrows. Meanwhile, a shady-looking guy approaches him and initiates a conversation. He introduces himself as Joe and shockingly reveals that he, too, is a werewolf. He further explains that he knows about Caden's secret as well. According to Joe, there are more werewolves like them out there, and many of them have disguised themselves well into society. Curious, Caden wonders how he turned into one, despite the fact that he has never been bitten before. However, Joe doesn't answer any of his questions and prepares to leave. Before exiting the bar though, he leads Caden to a certain town, saying that he will get all his answers there. In the next scene, Caden arrives at the said town and enters yet another bar. Surprisingly, all the people there start staring at him. Among them is a menacing-looking guy named Connor. Caden ignores all of this and starts flirting with the beautiful bartender, Angel, but before he can get to know her better, a drunk guy approaches him and tries to initiate a fight. Soon, his friends also join and the situation becomes tense. However, Caden, who is already a wanted criminal, backs out, not wanting to cause any commotion. He leaves the bar silently, but waits near the bushes to exact revenge. An hour later, the drunk guy also leaves, and when he is alone, Caden confronts him about the earlier incident. Suddenly, the guy starts changing into a werewolf. He then prepares to attack Caden, but our protagonist seems to be simply too powerful. He beats the hell out of the drunk guy, making him pee his pants. After this, as Caden reaches his bike, an old man suddenly shows up. He introduces himself as John and offers the boy a job at his farm. Caden, who is desperate for a place to live, immediately accepts the offer. From the next morning, he starts working on the farm and gives it his all. It appears as if Caden is finally going to turn a corner, but one morning, the menacing-looking guy from the bar, Connor, shows up. He confronts John and inquires why he appointed a stranger for the job. In response, the old farmer lies that the boy is his nephew. Connor doesn't believe this, and also mentions that his friend was beaten up by Caden, but the duo denies this. Seemingly out of question, Connor leaves, but he warns the boy that he will keep an eye on him. That night, as Caden is heading to the bar, a guy suddenly approaches him, claiming that he is his nephew. He also warns Caden that he should leave town as soon as possible, because if Connor finds out about his real identity, he will be killed. The guy then proceeds to introduce himself, but right then, Connor shouts from afar. This frightens the guy and he quickly runs away, while a confused Caden enters the bar and starts chatting with Angel. Later, we see that Connor and his gang have captured the guy and are questioning him in the middle of the woods. They ask what he said to Caden earlier, but the guy doesn't open his mouth out of fear. Enraged, Connor decides to play a brutal game. He orders the guy to run into the woods, and after a few seconds, the entire gang starts chasing after him. Elsewhere, as Caden is returning home on his bike, he hears the guy screaming for help. He quickly decides to help and enters the woods, where he surprisingly comes across Angel. It turns out she also followed the gang after hearing the noises. The two then venture deep into the woods and come across a gruesome sight. Connor and his gang have killed the guy and are now devouring him bit by bit. This reveals that all of them are werewolves. Angel, who is used to such incidents in the town, doesn't even flinch, but Caden is disgusted and he throws up. To his surprise, Angel already knows that he is a werewolf too. Following this, the two return home, where John and his wife, Clara, are watching the news about Caden's apparent murders. Realizing that his cover has been blown, Caden apologizes and prepares to leave, but right then, Clara hugs him tightly saying, "It is not your fault." Then, John steps forward and dishes out a shocking revelation. He explains that Caden's mother, Tina, was a pure-blooded werewolf from this very town. Her enchanting looks and warm personality made all the men fall in love with her, and Connor was no exception. He asked Tina to be his wife, and when she declined, he forced himself onto her and made her pregnant. This is how Caden was born. But afraid of the backlash, Tina was hidden in the basement and Caden was given up for adoption to a loving couple. A month later, Tina couldn't bear the pain anymore and she committed the unthinkable. The news eventually reached Connor, and he became more violent and bit a lot of humans, turning them into werewolves. Now, he operates a large gang, and his only mission is to breed with the only pure-blooded female in town, who happens to be Angel. John further explains that the werewolves are of two types, pure blood and hybrid. Caden is one of the pure-blooded ones, and this explains why he is so strong. On the other hand, the hybrid wolves are much weaker. Hearing all this, Caden is left speechless, but he finally understands how he became who he is today. Sometime later, Caden, along with Angel, head to the barn where they continue their conversation. The latter reveals that she is voluntarily going to offer herself to Connor, so that the brutality can come to an end. However, Caden is totally against it. This is because he has started to harbor feelings for her. Surprisingly, in the heat of the moment, they end up making out. Caden turns into a werewolf because of the intense emotions, but even this does not stop the two from having coitus. Once they are done, a reinvigorated Caden heads to Connor's hideout and confronts him. He reveals that he is Tina's son, and warns Connor to stay away from Angel. Unfortunately, the evil werewolf doesn't believe it, and he instead sends his men after the boy. With this, an intense fight ensues in the woods, and Caden, who is a pureblood, takes down all the hybrid wolves one after another. But just when he is about to emerge victorious, Connor arrives there in his deadly wolf form and attacks him. At last, Caden is overpowered and cornered, and in order to save himself, he has no choice but to jump off a cliff. This breaks almost all the bones in his body, and just when it appears as if he is going to pass away, Joe suddenly arrives and urges him to get up. Caden, who is still in a state of shock, slowly gets to his feet, but when he looks around, no one is there. It turns out he was hallucinating earlier. Caden then staggers on for a while until Angel arrives there and rescues him. The next morning, we see him lying in bed, with bruises and cuts all over his body. John asks him to turn into a werewolf, as it is the only way to heal, but Caden is unable to do so. Hence, Angel springs into action and kisses him, once again arousing the werewolf inside his body. The plan works and all the bruises on his body instantly start healing. Following this, Caden, along with the help of John, starts plotting to finish off Connor once and for all. They head to the warehouse and prepare some explosives, which they then seal inside bags and bury in the fields. The plan is to summon Connor and his gang near the explosives and blow them up at the right moment. Later, as Caden is busy in the field, he suddenly hears Angel's screams. Terrified, he immediately rushes inside the house, only to realize that Connor has kidnapped her, along with John, Clara, and their daughter. He has also left a note, which invites Caden to the mating ceremony between Connor and Angel that night. In the next scene, we see that it is a full moon night and the ceremony has already begun. John and his family are locked inside a cage while Angel is brought on a wooden stretcher. Connor excitedly looks at her, ready to have vigorous intimacy. Just then, two of his henchmen are attacked nearby and killed. It is none other than Caden, who has arrived in his most deadliest form. Connor immediately orders his men to attack him, but all of them are of no match. An enraged Caden single-handedly defeats all of them before freeing Angel from her shackles. Surprisingly, due to the full moon, she, too, turns into a werewolf and starts attacking the other hybrid wolves. At an opportune moment, she then frees John and his family from the cage, before fleeing in the woods. Later, Caden manages to lure the bad guys into the farm, where John is already waiting with a rifle in his hand. As per the plan, he shoots at the mines and blows up the ground, killing some of the werewolves in the process. Unfortunately, this only infuriates Connor and he goes on a rampage to find the culprits. When he spots Caden in the barn, he immediately enters inside with his men, but unbeknownst to them, this was only a trap. Caden secretly exits through another door and seals the entire barn, trapping Connor and his men inside. Then, John shoots at one of the explosives inside, blowing up the entire place. This is enough to kill all the henchmen, but Connor remains unscathed. Following this, an intense fight ensues between Caden and Connor. The two, both being pure-blooded werewolves, match each other stride for stride and dish out brutal punishments on each other. But in the end, it is Caden who comes out on top due to his sheer determination to avenge his mother and all the loved ones that have been taken from him. As Connor lies on the ground, injured and defeated, he reveals something shocking. It turns out he and Tina were actually in love with each other, and they made romance with mutual consent. However, after Tina's death, her father became enraged and spread false rumors that Connor forced himself onto her. Caden is left stunned by the information, and as he is contemplating on what to do next, the shady guy from earlier, Joe, suddenly appears. With a grin on his face, he reveals that this was all his plan. When he learned of Caden's whereabouts, he killed his adoptive parents and lured him in this town. He then manipulated the boy into starting a war with Connor and ultimately killing him. Joe reveals that he did all this because he wanted to exact revenge on Connor, who humiliated and exiled him from the town. Since he was not strong enough to do so, he turned to Caden. Hearing all this, Caden becomes enraged and tries to attack Joe, but he is quickly knocked out. Then, the evil guy proceeds towards a weakened Connor and finishes him off with a deadly claw to the throat. After this, he proceeds to strangle Caden to death, but before he can complete the task, John shoots him in the hand. This forces Joe to retreat, however, he cannot reach far as Caden tackles him to the ground. The two werewolves then face each other in an intense stare-down. Joe pulls out a cigarette and starts smoking, but Caden quickly throws it to the ground and backs away. Surprisingly, it turns out to be a part of the plan as there is a mine directly below Joe. The cigarette ignites it, and by the time Joe catches wind of this, it is already too late. The next second, he is blown to smithereens, finally bringing an end to the chaos. The movie ends as Caden and Angel depart the town the following morning, hoping they can find the other pure-blooded werewolves and unite with them.